Welcome to Midnight Mysteries. If you feel like listening to a horror story, you're in the right place. Let me know what you think in the comments. Enjoy listening. A school in the heart of the city, surrounded by large oaks and a well-kept garden, bustled with students coming and going, laughing and joking. It was one of those cool, early autumn mornings, with the sun filtering through the leaves, creating plays of light and shadow on the courtyard. The students, amid laughter and last-minute homework, crowded the hallways, ready to start another day of classes. But suddenly, the atmosphere changed drastically. An unexpected silence fell over the whole school when the principal's metallic voice broke through the loudspeakers, usually reserved for end-of-day announcements or rare emergencies. His voice, normally calm and reassuring, sounded different. It was tense, almost worried. The students stopped, the older ones immediately realizing that something was wrong, while the younger ones looked around, confused, seeking reassurance in the faces of their classmates and teachers. At that moment, the daily routine, made up of jokes and homework, became irrelevant. Every gaze was turned toward the loudspeakers, every ear strained to catch every single word. "Good morning, everyone," the principal began, but his voice lacked the usual firmness. There was a tremor in it, a hint of anxiety that had never been heard before. It felt as if he was trying to maintain calm, but beneath the surface, something deeply troubled him. "We have been informed," he continued, pausing to find the right words, "of an emergency situation in the city. We don't have all the details at the moment, but what we do know is serious." A slight rustle was heard in the hallways as students exchanged worried glances. Many tried to imagine what could be so serious as to shake their principal so much. "For now," the principal continued, "I ask you to remain in your classrooms. Close the doors and lower the blinds if possible. This is a precautionary measure to ensure your safety." A slight tension was palpable in the air. The students had never been in such a situation, and the uncertainty was evident in their eyes. The principal concluded his announcement by saying, "As soon as we have further information, we will update you. Trust your teachers and follow their instructions. And remember, your safety is our top priority." As the principal's voice faded, a heavy silence fell over the hallways and classrooms. The students, now aware of the gravity of the situation, tried to understand what was really happening outside the walls of their school. The murmur began almost immediately, subdued and uncertain. Small groups of students began to whisper among themselves, with fragmented sentences and overlapping questions. "Did you hear anything? What kind of emergency? Do you think it's serious?" The hallways, which had been filled with laughter and chatter just moments before, were now dominated by low, worried voices. The students looked around, eyes wide with anxiety. Curiosity and apprehension were painted on every face. Many sought comfort and understanding in the eyes of their friends, hoping that someone had an answer, an explanation, or at least a theory. The older students tried to remain calm, not to scare the younger ones, but it was clear that they too were worried. You could see it in their quick glances and nervous gestures, like repeatedly checking their phones or whispering among themselves, trying to piece together bits of information. Some students moved closer to the windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of some clue from what was happening outside. Others sat at their desks, clutching their backpacks as if they were lifebuoys in a stormy sea. In this climate of growing tension, every little noise, every creak or distant voice seemed amplified, adding an extra layer of nervousness to the already tense atmosphere. Just a few minutes after the principal's announcement, an unexpected and sudden change occurred. The lights in the classrooms and hallways began to flicker. Initially, it was a faint pulsation, almost imperceptible, but soon it became more evident. A sequence of flickers, as if the school itself were blinking, followed by moments when the lighting dimmed completely for fractions of a second, only to return as bright as before. The shiver of surprise and apprehension among the students grew. Every flicker made the atmosphere even denser and more charged. Teachers and students exchanged worried looks. What's happening to the electrical system? Some wondered. Is it connected to the emergency the principal mentioned? Others whispered. With the instability of the light, the classrooms turned into places of dancing shadows and chiaroscuro games reminiscent of Gothic tales. This ghostly atmosphere intensified the insecurity and general anxiety. Many students, driven by curiosity and the need to understand the situation, moved closer to the windows. But beyond the glass, the darkness was almost total. It was as if a black veil had wrapped around the school, separating it from the rest of the world. The external view, which usually offered a clear sight of the courtyard and surrounding streets, now showed only a black, impenetrable void. This further amplified the sense of isolation and uncertainty, as if the school had become a lost island in a sea of darkness. With the lights continuing to flicker and the darkness outside the windows, a surreal atmosphere had pervaded the school. The students, sitting or standing, seemed almost like statues, immobilized by tension and uncertainty. The minutes passed slowly, making every moment eternal, as if the outside world had ceased to exist and the only reality was this bizarre turmoil of lights and shadows. Then, unexpectedly, a sound broke the silence. Initially, it was little more than a whisper, a melancholic moan that seemed to come from afar. It was like the wind blowing through the branches of a tree, but there was something in that sound that made it different, something human but sinister and disturbing. As the moan grew, it became clear that it was not the product of collective imagination. It was real, and it was getting louder, closer. What had initially been a distant groan turned into a cry of anguish, full of pain and despair. The students turned towards the doors and windows, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. Some clung to each other, seeking comfort in physical proximity. Others covered their ears, as if trying to block out that harrowing sound. The tension was palpable. Every gaze was fixed, every breath held. The cry became more intense, almost as if whoever was making that sound was right outside the school, asking for help or perhaps trying to get in. The barrier between the safe inside of the school and the outside, from where that anguished voice was coming, seemed increasingly thin, and the students were tormented by the fear of what might happen. However, as suddenly as it had started, the event ended just as abruptly. The lights, which had flickered creating a nightmare atmosphere, stabilized quickly, restoring a constant and reassuring brightness to the classrooms and hallways. The desperate scream, which had tormented every soul present, died out suddenly, leaving behind a silence so deep it was almost deafening. For a long moment, the school seemed suspended in a state of collective disbelief. The students looked at each other, still clinging to the comfort of friends' arms or with hands over their ears, trying to understand if what they had just experienced was real or just the product of collective imagination. And then, the familiar voice of the principal sounded again from the loudspeakers. "I apologize for the interruption and the anxiety caused," he said, in his usual calm and reassuring tone. "We wanted to test our emergency procedures and the reaction of the students in case of unexpected situations. There was no real emergency." A murmur of shock and anger began to spread among the students. Some were relieved, while others felt betrayed, made fun of. The teachers, apparently unaware of the test, tried to restore order and calm tempers. "I understand that many of you may feel upset," the principal continued, "and we will organize discussion sessions to process what has happened. Once again, I apologize for the anxiety caused." The day, which had started like any other, had turned into a whirlwind of emotions and questions. As the students tried to return to normalcy, many wondered what the true purpose of that test had been and if, in reality, there was something bigger behind it all. Even though the principal's voice tried to calm tempers, the students' eyes reflected doubt. A widespread sense of discontent and distrust grew in every classroom. They had heard that scream, experienced the darkness, felt the palpable tension. How could it all be part of a simple test? In the chaos that followed the announcement, small groups of students began to share what they had noticed and heard. A boy on the third floor swore he had seen shadows moving outside the window before everything went dark. A girl, who had been in the bathroom during the event, said she had heard footsteps in the hallway, footsteps that did not belong to any teacher or student. Additionally, some students remembered that, just before the announcement, they had seen some men in dark clothes speaking softly with the principal in his office through the slightly open window of the door. Was it really just a coincidence? The feeling was that beneath the surface, beneath the principal's reassuring words, there was something hidden. The truth, however uncomfortable or disturbing it might be, seemed elusive. The students felt they were being kept in the dark about something much bigger and more dangerous than a simple and harmless emergency test. In the following days, the atmosphere in the school changed. The looks were more suspicious, the conversations whispered. The students exchanged theories and conjectures, trying to piece together the parts of a puzzle that seemed increasingly complex. And even though the daily routine resumed, a question hovered in everyone's minds. What really happened that day? And, more disturbingly, what were they trying to hide?